Before the noise of the day starts pulling you in 1,000 directions, before the expectations, the pressure, the scrolling, the rushing, and the quiet anxiety that tries to convince you that you're already behind, there is a place your soul needs to return to, because if your soul is not anchored, the day will drift you. And so many of us are not falling apart because life is too hard. We are falling apart because we started the day unanchored. We checked the world before we checked our spirit. We listened to everything before we listened for God. And by the time we finally pause, we're already emotionally scattered, mentally exhausted, and spiritually dry. But today is a different kind of invitation. This is a call to anchor your soul in God before the day pulls you away. Not as a religious routine, but as a lifeline, a grounding, a remembering of who holds you when everything else feels uncertain. Because when your soul is anchored, the chaos can move, but you won't. The pressure can rise, but you won't break. The day can demand, but it won't define you. So before you respond to the world, make sure your soul has already responded to God. Starting your day anchored, not anxious, is not just a motivational idea. It is a spiritual discipline that reshapes the entire tone of your life. The way you begin your morning quietly determines the strength you carry into everything that follows. Most people wake up and immediately step into urgency, checking messages, thinking about responsibilities, replaying yesterday's worries, or anticipating today's pressure. Before their feet even fully touch the ground, their mind is already racing ahead of them. And in that state, anxiety doesn't need permission to enter. It simply takes advantage of the open door. But when you choose to anchor your day instead of starting it in anxiety, you are making a conscious decision to pause the noise before it begins. Anchoring means you are intentionally grounding your thoughts, emotions, and spirit in something stable, something unshakable. It is the act of refusing to let your first thoughts be dictated by fear or pressure. Instead, you create space for peace to take the lead. This is not about denying reality or pretending life is easy. It is about refusing to let uncertainty define your inner state. Anxiety thrives in unguarded moments. It grows when your mind is uncentered and when your heart has no place of rest. The morning is often the most vulnerable time because your spirit is transitioning from rest to responsibility. If you do not intentionally guide that transition, the world will do it for you. Notifications will set your mood. Expectations will shape your mindset. Memories will influence your emotions. And before you know it, your day is not yours anymore. It belongs to everything else demanding a piece of you. But anchoring your day shifts that dynamic completely. It means you take ownership of your first moments. You decide that before anything else speaks to you, peace will speak first. Before worry builds momentum, stillness will have its say. Before pressure defines your identity for the day, truth will remind you of who you are and whose you are. This creates an internal stability that does not depend on external conditions. When your day begins anchored, even challenges do not hit the same way. Problems may still arise, but they do not shake your foundations easily. You respond instead of react. You think clearly instead of spiraling emotionally. You carry a sense of steadiness that people around you can feel even if they cannot explain it. That is the power of being anchored. It is not loud, but it is deeply strong. Anxiety often gives the illusion of control. It makes you feel like if you worry enough, plan enough, or anticipate every outcome, you can prevent uncertainty. But in reality, anxiety only drains you before the day even begins. It convinces you that preparation and panic are the same thing when they are not. Anchoring reminds you that peace is also a form of preparation. A calm spirit is more equipped to handle life than a chaotic one trying to control everything. Choosing to be anchored is also an act of trust. It is trusting that you are not alone in carrying the weight of your day. It is releasing the illusion that everything depends solely on your effort, your timing, or your ability to manage outcomes perfectly. When you start your day anchored, you are acknowledging that there is a strength beyond your own, a guidance beyond your understanding, and a stability that does not shift with circumstances. And slowly, this practice changes you. It does not remove challenges, but it transforms how you move through them. You stop waking up bracing for impact and start waking up grounded in peace. You become less reactive to chaos and more rooted in clarity. Your mornings stop being a rush into survival mode and become a return to center. Don't let the world speak before God does is about protecting the order of influence in your life, because whatever speaks first usually speaks loudest in your mind. The first voice you listen to in the morning often becomes the filter through which you interpret everything else that happens in your day. If the world speaks first, it speaks in pressure, comparison, urgency, and noise. It speaks through notifications, expectations, deadlines, social media, and the silent pressure to keep up. And when that voice gets in first, it tends to shape your mood before your spirit has a chance to settle into truth. There is something subtle but powerful about how influence works. It does not always come through dramatic moments. Often it comes through early access. What gets your attention first gains authority over your thoughts. That is why letting the world speak before God does is not a small habit. It becomes a pattern that gradually trains your heart to respond to chaos before peace. You may not notice it at first, but over time, your inner world starts to mirror the pace and pressure of everything external. When you wake up and immediately reach for the world, you are essentially allowing temporary voices to define your permanent identity for the day. You hear what is expected of you before you remember who you are. You see what others are doing before you are reminded of your own path. You absorb urgency before you receive clarity. And in that space, your soul becomes reactive instead of rooted. You begin the day already responding instead of discerning, but when you choose to let God speak first, you are shifting the foundation of your entire inner world. You are not just adding a spiritual habit, you are changing the order of authority. You are saying that before any opinion, pressure, or gets access to your mind, truth will have the first word. And that first word matters because it sets the tone for everything else that follows. There is a quiet strength that comes from beginning your day with divine perspective. It does not mean the world disappears or responsibilities vanish. It means your interpretation of those things changes. When God speaks first, He doesn't always remove the challenges, but He repositions your understanding of them. What once looked overwhelming begins to look manageable. What once felt personal begins to feel purposeful. What once created fear begins to lose its grip because your identity has already been reminded of something greater than circumstance. The world is always speaking, and it is not always wrong in what it presents, but it is often incomplete. It shows you urgency without peace, success without grounding, comparison without context, and pressure without strength. If you allow it to speak first, you end up reacting to an incomplete narrative. But when God speaks first, He frames everything with wholeness. He reminds you that your value is not in competition, your purpose is not fragile, and your path is not random. There is also a deeper emotional protection in this practice. When the world speaks first, it often enters through anxiety. It wakes up your mind before your spirit is ready, and it begins to layer thoughts that are not always rooted in truth. But when you start with God, you are essentially fortifying your inner world before external voices arrive. You are not avoiding reality. You are strengthening your ability to face it without losing yourself in it. This is why so many people feel overwhelmed so early in the day. It is not always because their lives are too heavy, but because their inner order is disrupted before they are even fully awake. The heart was never meant to carry the weight of the world without first being centered in something stable. And when that order is restored, something shifts internally. You move through your day with a sense of alignment instead of fragmentation. Letting God speak first is also a form of discipline against distraction. It requires intention because everything around you is designed to capture your attention immediately. But when you resist that pull, even briefly, you are reclaiming your mental and spiritual space. You are teaching your soul that not everything deserves immediate access, and not every voice deserves equal authority. Over time, this practice creates a different kind of strength. You stop being easily shaken by what you see or hear because your foundation is no longer built on reaction. You become steadier in thought, calmer in response, and clearer in direction. The world may still speak throughout your day, but it no longer defines the first and deepest layer of your identity, which remains anchored in something greater than noise. Spiritual grounding protects emotional stability in a way that most people don't fully recognize until they have lived without it. Emotional instability is not always about having a difficult life. Often it is about having an unanchored inner life. When your spirit is not grounded, every external shift feels like a personal collapse. A small disappointment feels like failure. A delayed answer feels like rejection. A change in plans feels like loss of control. And over time, Your emotional world becomes reactive instead of steady, constantly pulled by whatever is happening around you. Spiritual grounding is what creates depth beneath your emotions so that they are no longer the only thing steering your responses. It is the difference between being carried by feelings and being supported beneath them. Without grounding, emotions sit at the surface of everything. They become the loudest voice in the room, even when they are not telling the full truth. But when your spirit is grounded, your emotions still exist, still matter, still speak, but they no longer dominate your entire inner reality. There is a reason life feels heavier when you are disconnected from spiritual grounding. Every situation carries more weight than it was meant to. You begin to interpret circumstances through the lens of fear instead of stability. You assume permanence in temporary pain and meaninglessness in necessary delay. Emotional instability is not just about feeling deeply. It is about feeling deeply without a foundation to hold what you feel. And that lack of foundation creates exhaustion because your heart is constantly trying to process life without support. Spiritual grounding creates that support. It gives your inner world a center of gravity. It does not remove emotional experiences, but it organizes them. Instead of every feeling pulling you in a different direction, there is something within you that holds steady. That steadiness allows you to experience emotions without becoming consumed by them. You can feel disappointment without falling into despair. You can feel uncertainty without losing hope. You can feel pressure without collapsing under it. Many people mistake emotional control for emotional suppression, but grounding is neither. It is not about shutting down what you feel. It is about placing what you feel in the right order. When your spirit is grounded, emotions are acknowledged but not worshipped. They are listened to but not obeyed blindly. There is space between feeling and reacting, and in that space, wisdom can enter. Without spiritual grounding, that space disappears. Feeling and reacting become the same moment. You feel something and immediately you become it. Anger turns into words you didn't think through. Fear turns into decisions you later regret. Sadness turns into withdrawal that isolates you further. But grounding restores that pause. It gives you back the ability to respond instead of react, to observe instead of absorb, to understand instead of spiral. There is also a protective quality in grounding that keeps your identity from being shaped by emotional fluctuations. When you are not grounded, your sense of self rises and falls with your circumstances. A good day makes you feel secure. A bad day makes you question everything. But when your spirit is grounded, your identity is not built on what is happening around you, but on something deeper within you. That stability does not mean you are unaffected by life. It means you are not defined by it. Spiritual grounding also affects how you carry stress. Stress does not disappear in life, but it is carried differently when you are rooted. Without grounding, stress accumulates until it feels unbearable. Every responsibility stacks on top of another until even small things feel heavy. But when you are grounded, stress is distributed. It is processed in a way that does not overwhelm your emotional capacity because there is an internal steadiness that helps absorb pressure without breaking. This grounding is not something that happens accidentally. It is formed through intentional moments of stillness, reflection, and connection before life begins demanding your attention. It is built when you choose to center yourself before the chaos begins speaking. And the more consistently you do that, the more stable your emotional world becomes. You begin to notice that things which once disturbed you deeply no longer have the same power over your peace. Over time, spiritual grounding becomes less of a practice and more of a posture. It is not just something you do in the morning or during difficult moments. It becomes the way you exist within your day. You carry a steadiness that is not easily shaken. You become less dependent on circumstances to feel okay and more anchored in something that does not shift when life does. Chaos loses power over a centered soul because chaos only dominates what is scattered. When the inner life is fragmented, everything outside feels amplified. Small disruptions become overwhelming. Unexpected changes feel like emergencies, and pressure builds faster than peace can settle in. But when a soul is centered, chaos no longer has the same authority. It may still exist. It may still move around you, but it cannot easily move within you. A centered soul is not one that avoids chaos, but one that is no longer easily displaced by it. There is a difference between being in the middle of turbulence and being internally turbulent. Life will always carry moments of disorder, unpredictability, and noise. But the question is not whether chaos exists around you. It is whether chaos can control what is happening within you. Centering creates that internal separation. It builds a space where external disorder does not automatically become internal disorder. When a person is not centered, they become emotionally porous. Everything enters quickly and deeply. A stressful message can change the entire mood of the day. A difficult conversation can linger for hours or even days. A sudden problem can disrupt not just the moment, but the mindset. In that state, chaos does not need permission to enter. It simply finds an open door. And once it enters, it spreads, affecting thoughts, decisions, and even self-perception. But a centered soul operates differently. There is a grounded awareness that not every disturbance deserves full internal residence. You can acknowledge something without absorbing it. You can respond to a situation without letting it redefine your entire emotional state. This is not emotional detachment, it is emotional order. It is the ability to keep your inner world aligned even when the outer world is shifting. Chaos often gains strength through reaction. The more immediate and intense the reaction, the more control chaos appears to have. But when a soul is just centered, reactions are no longer automatic. There is a pause, a space between what happens and how it is processed. In that space, chaos begins to lose its grip. It cannot fully control what is not immediately surrendered to it. That pause is where clarity begins to form and where peace has room to reassert itself. There is also something deeply stabilizing about having a centered identity. When you are not centered, your sense of self becomes vulnerable to whatever is happening around you. A good moment inflates your confidence temporarily, while a difficult moment deflates it just as quickly. But when your soul is centered, identity is not constantly shifting with circumstances. It remains rooted in something deeper than emotional fluctuation. That rootedness makes it harder for chaos to distort how you see yourself. Chaos thrives in environments of inner urgency. When everything feels like it must be solved immediately, chaos multiplies. It feeds on rushed thinking, emotional overwhelm, and scattered attention. A centered soul disrupts that cycle. It does not mean nothing is urgent. It means not everything is treated as urgent at the same level. There is discernment in what deserves immediate attention and what can be approached with patience. That discernment weakens chaos because chaos depends on equal emotional weight being given to everything. Another way chaos loses power is through internal clarity. When the mind is scattered, even simple situations feel complex. But when the soul is centered, clarity begins to simplify what chaos tries to complicate. You start to see situations more accurately instead of through emotional distortion. Problems are still problems, but they are no longer magnified beyond their actual size. This clarity reduces the emotional noise that chaos depends on. There is also strength in stillness. A centered soul is not a passive soul, but a stable one. Stillness does not mean inactivity, it means internal alignment. In that stillness, chaos cannot easily provoke unnecessary movement. Not every wave requires you to move with it. Some waves pass because you are not internally reacting to their intensity. Stillness becomes a form of resistance against emotional instability. Over time, as a soul becomes more centered, chaos begins to feel less threatening. The same situations that once created overwhelm no longer have the same emotional effect. It is not because life has become easier, but because the internal structure has become stronger. The center holds even when everything else is shifting. Presence with God before the pressure of life is about the order in which you allow influence to enter your inner world. Pressure is always going to exist. Life does not pause its demands just because you feel unready, overwhelmed, or uncertain. Responsibilities still arrive, expectations still rise, and situations still require decisions. But the difference between a soul that feels crushed under pressure and a soul that moves with steadiness is often found in what happens before the pressure begins speaking. When presence with God is placed before pressure, something shifts in how life is carried. You are no longer stepping into your day empty and expecting yourself to handle everything from internal exhaustion. Instead, you are stepping in filled with a sense of alignment, clarity, and grounding. That presence becomes the inner environment you carry into everything else. Without it, pressure does not just exist externally. It begins to settle internally, shaping thoughts, emotions, and even identity. Pressure becomes heavier when it is the first voice you respond to. If your mind wakes up and immediately attaches itself to everything that must be done, everything that could go wrong, or everything that feels unfinished, then your inner world starts the day already compressed. You are not even fully present in your own life before you begin trying to manage it. And that creates a quiet but constant exhaustion that builds throughout the day. But presence with God first creates a different rhythm. It slows down the internal rush that pressure tries to create. It is not about escaping responsibility. It is about establishing stability before responsibility takes hold. When you begin from presence, you are not reacting to life from a place of depletion. You are responding from a place of fullness. That fullness does not remove pressure, but it changes your relationship with it. There is something powerful about being spiritually present before being mentally productive. Modern life often trains people to prioritize output over grounding, to immediately think about what must be done rather than who they are becoming in the process. But when presence comes first, productivity is no longer driven by anxiety. It is guided by clarity. You are not working from panic. You are moving from peace. Pressure feeds on absence. It grows stronger in moments where you feel disconnected, distracted, or internally scattered. When presence is missing, pressure fills that space quickly. It turns small tasks into overwhelming burdens and simple decisions into mental weight. But when presence is established first, pressure loses that empty space to occupy. There is already something occupying your inner world, something stable enough to hold you steady. Presence with God also reorders emotional energy. Without it, your emotional reserves are already being spent before the day fully begins. You wake up and immediately distribute your attention across worries, plans, and expectations. By the time real challenges arrive, you are already operating from emotional depletion. But presence restores that internal capacity. It replenishes what pressure tries to drain before the day even unfolds. There is also a quiet confidence that comes from beginning in presence. It is not a loud or forced confidence, but a settled one. It is the awareness that you are not navigating life alone in your strength alone. That awareness does not remove responsibility, but it removes the illusion that everything depends solely on your ability to carry it perfectly. Pressure becomes less threatening when you are not carrying it in isolation. When presence is prioritized, even difficult moments throughout the day are processed differently. Instead of being overwhelmed by each new demand, there is a steady reference point within you that remains unchanged. Pressure may increase externally, but internally there is a grounding that keeps you from being completely consumed by it. You begin to move through challenges with a sense of perspective rather than panic. Over time, this practice reshapes how you experience your entire life. You stop meeting pressure as the first reality of your day and start meeting it from a place of inner alignment. The weight of responsibility does not disappear, but your capacity to carry it expands because you are no longer carrying it from emptiness. Presence becomes the foundation that holds everything else in place.